Okay, we're live. I'm going to give it a minute or two and then launch into the welcome. I think everybody's in from the waiting room now, so why don't we get started? Hi, I'm Vivian New. I'm the president of the Santa Clara Valley chapter of the California Native Plant Society. Wanted to welcome everybody tonight to this great talk that we're going to have by Madeline Morrow, who is one of our previous presidents, and she's going to be talking about native plants for year-round color. But before her talk, I just wanted to get you a little bit of background on our organization and some of the things we're doing. So CNPS, if you're not familiar with us, we're a nonprofit environmental organization. We were founded in 1965. We have around 10,000 members in 35 chapters across the state, and we are the Santa Clara Valley chapter. We cover Santa Clara Valley, and that's Santa Clara and southern San Mateo. And actually, I think a little bit of Santa Cruz as well. And what we are all about is saving California's native plants and their habitats, and we do that by bringing together science, education, conservation, and gardening. And tonight we're going to be tackling that gardening piece of this. And if you are not currently a member of CNPS, we would love to have you join us. It's a wonderful organization, and when you're a member, you get these two great publications, Fremantle and Flora. A lot of really fun and interesting, useful information in both of those publications. You also get our chapter newsletter, The Blazing Star, which will tell you what we're doing and give you a lot of other interesting information. And you also get discounts on our chapter events, statewide events, and native plant nurseries. So if you aren't a member, please point your web browser at cnps.org/join and join us. And we have a bunch of other events coming up soon. We have a photo sharing meeting next week, and that's a lot of fun. It's open to the public, and if you're a photographer and would like to share your pictures, we would love to have you join us as part of that as well. And you can find out more about that on our website. In mid-December, we have another fantastic talk coming up. If you're familiar with Edgewood Park, this is about the Project 467, which is all about enhancing the native plant diversity at Edgewood and what has been going on there. And it's really exciting, interesting stuff. So please join us if you're interested in that. And I'm really excited that in January, we have just booked Kate Marienchild, who's the author of Secrets of the Oak Woodland, who is going to be talking about the amazing manzanita and her relationships. And that is the perfect time to hear this talk, because January is the time that manzanitas really start bursting into bloom. And Kate is an incredible speaker. And also in January, we have our annual members night where we do photo sharing. And that's going to be a lot of fun. And that's on January 20th. And then you can get outside. Well, maybe you can. Actually, I guess with what's been going on with with COVID, that some of these things may get shut down. But when we are allowed, we are out there doing habitat restoration. And you can find out the latest status by going to our meetup page. And that will tell you that. And you can get to our meetup page by going to our website, which is cnps-scv.org. The other thing you can do now is buy plants online from our chapter nursery. And you now have 2 ways of picking your plants up. So you can go and shop to your heart's content, even while you're listening to Madeline speak. If she talks about something that interests you, you might be able to find it at our nursery. And then you can either have the plants delivered to your house if you live between Belmont and San Jose, or you can come by the nursery and pick them up. You have to schedule your pickup. So do not buy your plants and then drive over to the nursery. You do need to schedule that, and information about that is available on the site. You can also get t-shirts too. So if you like the Going Native Garden Tour t-shirts, you have a chance to get them there. And we're actually going to be adding our chapter t-shirts to the website as well. And if you're enjoying all our activities and you want to stay in touch, I strongly urge you to join our chapter news mailing list. That just is one message a week, and it just tells you what the upcoming activities are. We're scheduling new things all the time, and we try to let you know each time we have one of these talks what we know about, but we're always looking for more fun things to do. And if you want to stay up on the latest and greatest, please make sure you join our mailing list. It is open to the public. You don't have to be a member. And if you are a member and you're not on the list, you're not automatically added. So you need to do what we say here, which is just to send email to this email address, and that'll get you subscribed to the list. And if you're really enthusiastic and you're just looking for something to do, we can really use help. And so if you like these talks and you're used to using Zoom now and you'd like to get behind the scenes a bit, we could sure use more help. We have, right now for this talk, you have me, there's Madeline, and behind the scenes we have Judy Fennerty, and we could use more help to do all of these things because it takes a group of us to put on each one of these talks. And you really don't, all you have to do is be able to use your keyboard, mouse, and be comfortable using a couple windows. We'll teach you anything you need to know. So if that sounds like something you'd like to do, please contact either Johanna Kwan or Madeline. Their contact information is on the slide. You can just send an email. And if you don't have that, you can find the information on our website too. And now I am going to wrap up what I'm about saying and turn it over to Madeline. She's going to be talking about native plants for year-round color. Madeline is a past president and an amazing person. She's an amazing gardener too. If you have not seen her garden as part of the Going Native Garden Tour, when we are live again, I strongly recommend making sure that you visit it because she often has her garden on the tour, and it is absolutely gorgeous. And so you can also see her garden online on the GNGT site, as well as she gave a talk. And so if you go on our YouTube channel, you can find her garden and a virtual tour of it. But she's a pretty amazing person, and I think you'll really enjoy the talk. And so one last thing is please mute your microphones. If you have any questions, please type them into the chat and we will be reading them off to Madeline after the talk. And so if there's anything that you want to know about as she's talking, please just put that in the chat and we will get her to answer them afterwards. So Madeline, if you want to go ahead and take it away, it's all yours.
Thank you, Vivian. Oops. Sorry there. Okay, this talk on native plants for year-round interest, I want to give you a little bit of background because I was originally asked to take over this talk from a really incredible person, Sherry Osaka. She was the key mover in our former physical going to libraries, gardening with natives talks, and she was just too busy to deliver this talk again. So many groups would ask for it. So I told her she was I told her I'd be happy to do it if she wanted to give me her slides. And sadly, last year, Sherry passed away. And, she's very much missed in the chapter. And I just want to say the beautiful templates come from her incredible sense of design. But I have added to this talk. But every time I look at it, I think of Sherry, and I just want to honor her as I'm doing it. Hope I do justice to her memory. And before I get started about this, I do want to do a little bit of why use native plants. I'm active in our Going Native garden tour, and we do run into a lot of people who don't know the difference between drought tolerant plants and native plants. Native plants are plants that have actually historically, well, way back, been growing here in what is called the California Floristic Province, which is pretty much the state of California and a little bit into Baja California, maybe about half of Baja California. So why should we use plants from this bioregion? I mean, first of all, is low water use, and California is one of the drier Mediterranean regions. Italian plants especially are used to somewhat more water. Also, we have many specific soils. Native plants are adapted to our soils. You don't have to use a lot of fertilizer. And the most important reason is to protect biodiversity. And this is true any place you live. Native animals depend on the native plants that they have evolved with. And studies have shown that areas planted with alien plants, namely plants not from that bioregion, produce 35 times less caterpillars. And that's the most popular and necessary insect food for birds. If birds can't get caterpillars, they can't raise their young. And the exotic plants that you get in the ornamental trade support 29 times fewer species of caterpillars than native ornamental plants. So this is something to think about. It's actually a different land ethic. The question I want to ask is, what is your garden for? What is your goal as, do you have an environmental goal of trying to protect biodiversity, which means the insects and the birds, lizards, frogs, all those other creatures that depend on them? All those creatures are under threat. And we can make a huge difference by changing how we garden, by using mostly native plants. And we just had a fantastic presentation by Professor Doug Tallamy. It's recorded on our YouTube channel. And his most recent book, Many Good Books, is called Nature's Best Hope. And he makes the point that adding up all the spaces in private yards across the US is a huge amount of land. You can make a difference. Now, people sometimes, and I've also run into people who say, well, California plants are just desert plants. First of all, most of the state is not desert. And so I want to go through all the ways that California plants give you attractive color throughout the year. And we're going to start with winter. It's very appropriate this time of year. And what you look for in winter is bark and form. What? Where's my photos? Just a minute, I'm having a little technical difficulty here. My slideshow has Okay. Can everyone see this? Just raise hands if you can see
You're
it.
fine, Madeline. You're fine.
Okay, I don't know what happened there.
You're good.
And just as a photo, this is just illustrating who I garden for. A representative of the natural world in this redwood tree, visible from my house, is this magnificent hawk who depends upon the smaller birds who depend upon the insects. So back we are to winter, bark and form. And we also have plants that flower in winter, most notably the manzanitas. And there's a manzanita for every spot in your garden. They come in so many different sizes and shapes. And in the winter, in late winter, they bloom, and you can see from the shape of the flower that these are in the heath family, or as I always think of them, blueberry relatives. Very hypersensitive mouth. And the other thing that we really focus on in winter is bark. Manzanitas have beautiful reddish brown bark, and especially when it rains, it gleams. Another plant that starts showing up in late winter is our native many ceanothus. There's also there's a ceanothus of many sizes, including small trees. And most people in California know about ceanothus, and I don't know why they're called lilacs, because they aren't lilac and they don't have a lilac scent. I once scented one that smelled like corn tortillas, but they're magnificent attractors of pollinators and beautiful all year round, even when not in bloom. And here's one of the many ground cover ceanothus. Another slightly higher ground cover ceanothus, Yankee Point, very common in the nursery trade. You can find this actually at many non-native nurseries too. And another important plant, this is actually showing it in spring, but the western redbud, which is a deciduous plant, has beautiful gray bark. And in winter, the pods remain on the tree and you have this shining gray bark. They actually are attractive with their branching habit, even when they are without leaves. And this is when they're in full bloom, and they are in the pea family. They really need no fertilizer. They're nitrogen fixing, like many things in the pea family. You can see where red twig dogwood gets its name. It's another deciduous plant, and in the winter, you see this really gorgeous red bark. They do sucker, and the new growth has the best color, so it's actually good sometime in the winter, fall, to prune your dogwood so you keep getting young stems. And we have many native currants. This is golden currant. They start blooming in late winter. And just, the beauties of bark, our native California buckeye. And if you have room, the western sycamore is a magnificent tree with this peeling white bark. Blue elderberry has interesting bark. It's a beautiful plant. It has to be controlled with frequent pruning, but it's indestructible. And of course, the oaks have gorgeous gray bark too, which really shows off in the winter. Some of them are deciduous, some of them are evergreen. The coast live oak is evergreen. And we showed, I had some flowers in here because our flowering season starts in late winter. But spring is when flowers start going crazy. More of the currants start blooming. This is, pink flowering currant. Buckeyes bloom. I mean, I regard them, at the very end of spring. They bloom at the end of spring. They have magnificent scented flowers. This is a representative of our many native bulbs, and meadow onion or Allium unifolium is one of the easiest to grow. Some of them are sort of rock garden, tricky. Allium unifolium likes clay. It spreads and blooms all over and then goes to sleep without making a mess. It's a great bulb to get started in your garden. And then we have the California bush anemone, which blooms typically mid-spring. Absolutely magnificent blooms. It's a rare plant in nature, but it's pretty easy to find in the nursery trade because it is so gorgeous. And then we have many, many wildflowers that bloom in the spring. And this is Farewell to Spring, used to be called in common name of Godetia, and you see that called that in old books. This wildflower reseeds in almost everyone's yard. It makes a spectacular show in mid to late spring, and if you give it in cooler locations, it'll go into early summer. And then there's bush poppy. This actually looks a little bit more like a late winter picture. In spring, it absolutely covers itself. And the coast sunflower starts blooming in spring. And you see has relatively small blooms for a sunflower, but it has a lot of them. And this is a late spring bloomer, St. Catherine's lace. It's one of the many eriogonums. This one is from the Channel Islands, and we have others. And these are all, besides being gorgeous, these are all major pollinator attractants. And if you have a vegetable garden, you really should plant buckwheats. They call them California buckwheats in general, eriogonums in your yard. And that's a close-up on the flowers. This is another one, Santa Cruz buckwheat, that acts more like a large, fairly tall ground cover. This is the little sulfur buckwheat from the Sierra. You want to give this one good drainage, but it has this beautiful yellow flower. There's a close-up on it. And this is a beautiful coastal flower. It grows really well for many people. I'm sad I've never gotten it to grow in my yard, but it's really easy for most people. So I don't know, I don't know, and that blooms in mid to late spring. And there's a little native bee on it. And one of the glories of spring are our native iris. This is the Douglas iris. And they bloom early to mid-spring typically. And there's many, many Pacific Coast hybrids. We have about 7 or so species of native iris, and hybridizers have great fun with them, and there's many, many beautiful colors. These are easy care, typically for 5 to 7 years. You don't have to do anything to them, and then it's good to divide them, unlike the garden iris, which at least I was told you're supposed to divide every year. And their foliage looks good most of the year. It sort of turns a little golden in the fall. And they're great under oaks. And of course, the monkey flowers, which can be a bit of a prima donna, but when they find a great location, they're incredible. I know if you have had trouble growing them in your yard, you should try them in a large container. I have one in the container, and it blooms like 9 months of the year. Coyote mint starts in mid to late spring, goes into early summer. And we have all the penstemons. This is the foothill penstemon with this beautiful lavender blue color. And this is more of a desert penstemon. You have to give it good drainage. It's very beautiful. There's so many penstemons. Penstemon etonii, one of the red ones, I have found to be quite easy. It's not very particular about where it grows, which is nice. It's easier than this one, at least in my yard. I have heavy clay, so I'm going to do year-round in my yard, and you'll see what works for me. But as you see, there's so many penstemons, you can find one that will grow very well in your yard and provide that long season of bloom in mid-spring into early summer. Cleveland sage is the most aromatic. It's the most pleasantly scented of all our sages. It's got this beautiful blue flower that blooms, and then woolly blue curls blooms over a long period of time. It's also in the sage family. Needs good drainage, but when it's happy, it is a magnificent plant. It's from Southern California, so you have to sort of not overwater it. It has this beautiful combination of purple and blue. And spring is a riot of flowers. Summer, we have somewhat fewer flowers, but that's one of the things about a Mediterranean climate. Summer is not the time of the most flowers. The time is in the spring. But we have beautiful foliage. This is one of our native sages, which has this beautifully textured gray-green foliage. Coffeeberry. And coyote brush is a wonderful ground cover. It will stay green in the harshest of droughts. And female plants have very attractive flowers. I think they're attractive. And then if you have a sort of shady, moister location, you can grow western hazelnut, which has these beautiful catkins. And one of our ceanothus, the variegated ground cover called Diamond Heights, has a yellow and green, attractively striped. This is a great ground cover for dry shade. And of course, in a moist location, sword ferns are incredible. Strawberries. And in summer, one of the mainstays of the summer garden is rosy buckwheat, which blooms over a very long period of time. And the flowers gradually turn sort of chestnut brown as they age. I don't cut them back until fall. That's the flower. Another summer bloomer is Chilean aster. It was named in Chile. It's actually native from, I think, Alaska to Patagonia. It's got a new name, which is, I find, unpronounceable. California fuchsia, which has nothing to do with fuchsias, is a great ground cover. They vary a lot in size. Some are small, some are big, some are aggressive, some are well-behaved. Select Mattole is one of the very well-behaved ones. And here's another one of our many buckwheats. The buckwheats are great color, provide great color and interest in the summer garden. And you see the sulfur buckwheat, which was chartreuse yellow before, has aged to this color. The grasses provide interest in summer as well. Going into late summer, we have golden aster with flowers and seeds. And one of the things, if you're gardening for biodiversity, is you don't want to deadhead too soon. So in terms of looking at a plant, the old thing, I used to think, oh my God, you have to cut off all these seeds. but you leave them on for the birds, and I cut them like once a year. Mission mallow blooms much of the year, and it has this beautiful, well, in this case, it's purple. Some of them are pink. There's variety in the color of the flowers. And there's like pink striped with magenta, which is also beautiful. And the California mallows have beautiful flowers. You need some space for them. They can be a bit aggressive. As with this magnificent plant, the Mataliha poppy, also called the fried egg plant, beautiful flowers. You want to put this in a space where you can contain it because it spreads. And fall has beautiful colors too. Some of these plants, like California fuchsia, continues blooming. I still have a few blooms on mine right now, like 3 or 4. But the fruits and nuts, the berries and the nuts provide color, and buckeyes have this really interesting seed that looks like someone decorated the tree with little ornaments. And that when they inside that sort of pear-shaped or drop-shaped seed coat are these nuts. California pipevine, which has a very strange flower, has an equally strange fruit. It's very interesting. The flower is shaped kind of like, they call it Dutchman's pipe too. It's sort of like actually like the U shape in a pipe. And these are the seed pods on the Western redbud. And the Western redbud has these red to magenta colored seed pods. I've seen them in some books described as unattractive, but I think they're interesting. And there's nuts on the hazelnuts. And one of the signs of fall is, toyons. I didn't show a picture, but toyons bloom in early summer, and then they have these green berries. And bingo, right around the equinox, they start changing from green to orange and very quickly then to red. And this is why people called it California holly, although it's no relation whatsoever. And it's one of the magnificent, it shows up in fall. It's also one of the magnificent features of the winter garden. Eventually the birds will strip them, but in early winter you also get these beautiful red berries. And I leave off pruning my toyon until Christmas time. And you see they get to be, these are sort of trimmed up almost like small trees. They're large shrubs. You have to have room for them. And the different, these are now berberis. The different berberis all have attractive berries. I realize I need to update this with some of them, with some of these botanical names that have changed. And the acorns are another feature that starts showing up in the fall. And their shapes can be, very different. This is the coast live oak. I have golden oaks or canyon oaks on my property, and they have burrs that have this golden fuzz on them, and they're, all the acorns are different. The currants have berries. You may not see them for long because they're very attractive to birds. I don't see much of them. I think you have to have a ton of them before the birds just don't eat them all. And if you have the native roses, you get rose hips. And this is actually showing the elderberry in bloom in the summer, and these are the fruits. And the elderberry is an interesting tree because it blooms over a long period of time. In late summer, the fruit starts ripening when there's still blooms on the tree. And I get mockingbirds coming to this tree all the time for the fruit. And snowberry has, you can see why they call it snowberry. Twinberry, very interesting fruit. And if you're interested in plants, there's a list of things here, but also in Calscape, there's a app on the internet called Cowscape that the California Native Plant Society put up, and you can look up plants and it will tell you what nurseries have them. You always have to check their availability because things go in and out of availability. And these are some excellent books if you're interested in getting started, if you don't have them. I really find California Native Plants for the Garden is sort of a Bible with me. This is, I think, can't remember if this is the old, there's a new edition of this one, but, and another one that isn't shown is Plants and Landscapes for Summer Dry Climates, by the East Bay Mud, I don't know, the Water District, I forget what that stands for. And it doesn't have only California natives in it, but it has a lot of California natives, and it's nice because it's written from a Bay Area perspective. So this is a good book. They have a little bit more expertise in Southern California, so the East Bay Mud book is very useful. And so summarizing, how do you get color in the garden? In the winter, bark and form, and of course flowers start then. Spring, it's flowers. Summer, primarily foliage. Fall, berries and nuts. And I just want to run through my garden to show you, starting from winter, one particular garden through the seasons. The previous slides were captured all kinds of different plants, but this is a plant this is a garden in Santa Clara Valley, near 85, heavy clay. And so it's fairly hot in comparison to, say, someone who lives in Palo Alto or Milpitas. I'm sorry, my mouse is just so touchy. So here I start with a picture in winter. And remember rain? It was a rainy day. But these are these two big manzanitas, Lewis Edmonds, that are blooming in winter. And you can see the pink flowers. But the dominant colors in the landscape are green and brown. But you can see the form. I've pruned up these manzanitas to show the form. And one of the things, look, here's another picture from the winter on a dry day. This is my corner with two of my three golden oaks and a manzanita. And from this picture, I also want to say, green is a color. And I think sometimes people forget that. Green is a color, and especially in a dry climate, I find green to be an extremely refreshing color. And even in any climate in the summer, green is, I think, having a garden that is, the greenness in the garden gives you a feeling of calm and a refuge. And here's the toyon berries in the winter are amazing. And this is what creek dogwood looks like in the winter. Well, actually in late winter. It loses its leaves, then in late winter it gets leaves and starts flowering. And you can see the reddish stems. And we all saw pictures of manzanita again, but just part of the color in manzanita, in addition to the flowers, comes the leaves frequently like this. The new growth can have a lot of red on it, and you have the reddish bark. Manzanitas are, I call them the bones of the garden because they look good in every season. They have an intrinsic elegance. And if there's one native shrub to put in your garden to look good all year round, I would say manzanita. Find the manzanita that works for you. And they're also in early spring, ceanothus starts blooming. I love this white flowering one called Snow Flurry. That's in my yard. And in early spring, the western redbuds start blooming. They bloom before the leaves. There's a close relative in the east, which is a small tree. The western redbuds are more multi-trunked. And one of the great combinations of early spring are Pacific iris and heuchera, or alum root, also called coral bells. This is the island alum root that's quite tall. So here's one combination. Here's another combination with some of the pink flowering heucheras. And I think this, if I remember, this iris is called Orchid Glow. It's another Pacific Coast hybrid. And you can see the very attractive heart-shaped leaves of the alum root. This is a smaller one. And blue-eyed grass bloom is an iris relative. It reseeds, so you have to be comfortable with that, but it flowers prolifically in early spring. I have a meadow, and the dominant color in the early spring is green with the purple from, it's called blue-eyed grass, but it's really purple, as you can see here. I don't know, whoever named it had some color vision issues. And when you see the leaves before it flowers, they look exactly like miniature iris. And so in mid-spring, you have more wildflowers. This is the Farewell to Spring, or Clarkia, the elegant Clarkia, which is quite tall. And I have poppies, California poppies. And that, mid-spring, the sulfur buckwheat blooms. And then late spring, I call this the flower frenzy. I have some areas where I let wildflowers reseed, and late spring, mid to late spring, there's so many flowers. That's why we have in mid-April, we have California Native Wildflower Week. And then in my meadow, the blue-eyed grass fades, and then the blue flax takes over. And another, the California flannel bush, Fremontodendron, is a mid to late spring bloomer, and it is a medium to very large bush, and it covers itself with these flowers. You need to be able to give it room, and also because the little hairs on the leaves and can be irritating. So you don't want to brush against it, and you have to wear gloves if you're pruning it. But it is a show-stopping plant. And grasses provide color too. This is grass flowers. This is alkali saccaton, which is a Southern California grass that has these beautiful feathery inflorescences, if I'm using the right word. And when grasses are backlit by the sun, they are so dramatic. And here's more grasses blooming. You can see a variety. I have mixed grasses. There's a variety of different shapes on their blooming. And after a while, redbuds get leaves. And this is an interesting period when there's still some flowers. The leaves have come out, but the seed pods are from last year. Coyote mint is a magnificent mid to early summer bloomer, and here it is thriving in the high shade of a blue oak. So it will grow in partial shade, and it doesn't need a lot of water. In fact, you don't want to overwater it, so it's a plant that can go in oaks. A great plant for for hosting butterflies and moths is the holly leaf cherry. This is it blooming in late spring. If you don't have room for a California oak, it's a small tree, very amenable to pruning, and it hosts a large number of caterpillars. You can never tell, but because, it has a lot of leaves. The seaside daisy starts blooming, goes into early summer. It'll bloom all summer in places that are cooler and wetter. And we've seen rosy buckwheat. It's one of the mainstays of my summer garden. And here's a vignette from late summer you see the seed pods. The cutout circles on the redbud leaves are from leaf cutting bees. And you can see the green berries. It's late summer, they haven't turned yet. The berries on the toyon are green. And I love the fact that every summer I get these leaf circles, so I know that my redbud is helping provide for the next generation of leaf cutting bees. They go to line their nests. And here's red twig dogwood and elderberry in early summer. And manzanitas have berries, which start coloring up in late summer, mid to late summer. And a summer annual that likes clay and reseeds is Madia, or tarweed. And I have a lot of it. If you have clay, this is something that you can grow. I mean, I think the only reason it's not grown more is that the flowers shut in the middle of the day, but it's really hot. So typically when it blooms, it's really hot. So I don't spend a lot of time in sunny areas in the middle of the day. The fact that the blooms are showy in the morning and the evening is fine with me. And there's a lot of variation, but I happen to get, my plants happen to have these magenta centers, which is my favorite. Some of them are actually all yellow. I like the magenta centers. And this was a very wet year. Madi do reseed, just like poppies. You know, if you have too many of them, you have to sort of go in the winter and pull them up. But it's pleasant because their foliage smells like pineapple. In late summer, we have the California fuchsia blooming, hummingbird magnet. But you can see it's late summer. A lot of plants have, their flowers have dried up in their seed pods. On the berberis, which were called Mahonia, you get berries. And they're a beautiful color. And another late summer bloomer are the goldenrods. And they really don't cause allergies. They've got a bad rap. Their pollen, I've been told by botanists, is so heavy it immediately falls to the ground. Ragweed, which blooms at the same time, pumps out all the pollen that gives people asthma. And this is a selection called Cascade Creek. And this is what the fall palette looks like. You know, you have grasses with, their flowers have dried. You have seed pods. These are the seed pods from a Cleveland sage. You have leaves, and you know, my hybrid California grape has red leaves. And here, the creek dogwood, the leaves have turned red, and the grasses here are still green. And here's late October, and in my meadow, there's a lot of dried seed heads, and I have some milkweed here, and this is some of the Madia, or tarweed, that I showed you before, and now they're in seed, and they have these beautiful sculptural forms against the late afternoon sun. And I don't pull these out too quickly because I've seen sparrows eating them. So the palette in late fall is muted before the winter rains. Before it rains, this is the Eriogonum giganteum, which was red. So we may not have a lot of trees that turn red, but this is definitely what fall looks like here. So there aren't a lot of flowers in fall. Here's a California fuchsia that's still holding on. And if you're interested in seeing natives, we do have a going native garden tour. We're trying to plan for either a virtual, physical, or a hybrid garden tour for April. Like most of us, we have no idea what's actually going to happen, but you can go to gngt.org and see videos of people putting up videos of their gardens. And that's the end of my talk. And well, actually, we'll just leave that for a while. I'd be happy to take questions.
Okay. Hi, Madeline. We've got a few. Great talk. Thank you very much for all of that. So just wondering, people are asking me about it being recorded. It will be, and it was on our YouTube channel, which is we posted in the Zoom chat here. So first of all, let's see. Sorry, just a moment. Is it possible to plant blue-eyed grass on a hill?
Interesting question. To tell you the truth, I don't have a lot of experience with hills because, as you see, my yard is pretty flat. I know that it's adapted. It's a plant that naturally occurs in grasslands, which means I think it should grow on a hill. It's competing very well with the grass. It's in heavy clay, growing with grass, and it grows in full sun and partial shade. Although in my yard, this is a very hot area of my yard, it seems to grow more prolifically in the partial shade. So I would get a plant and try it, and it will reseed in the areas that it likes.
Good advice. I've seen it mostly in meadows myself. So a question from one of our master gardeners: when we deadhead, we leave the seed heads under or behind the plant for the fauna. I think you had been talking about deadheading.
That's interesting. Okay.
I just wanted to mention that I made a note in the chat that I've had Select Mattole for a while, which I didn't realize wasn't the California fuchsia, but it's actually a Humboldt County fuchsia, and that's a selection from there. Something I didn't know. Georgia wants to share at 2,400 feet in San Mateo County, where she doesn't water. It's wildlands and occurs naturally. She still has, this time of the year in December, California fuchsia, aster, and coyote brush in bloom, accounting in part for the vast numbers of birds even now here in early December. So colors are great, and they are great providers. So those are all good suggestions. So, so a question: can elderberry be pruned to keep it under 15 feet, or would it be unhappy?
Elderberry, I believe elderberry cannot be killed. You can cut elderberry. I mean, I had mine basically cut to about 2 feet off the ground, and by the end of the summer, it was at 15 feet. But part of the problem is my elderberry is near my fence line, and the neighbors water too much. So what you want to do is don't overwater it, and you can cut it however you want. I mean, I think it's best to cut it in winter when it loses its leaves, and also keep an eye on the water. Mine gets huge because it has too much water available to it, but it's been cut almost to the ground and come back.
We have someone else confirming that it can be cut way back.
Yeah.
Just a note from our from Vivian that we on our website we have a list of native plants on our chapter website, different nurseries that carry native plants. So look for that. Especially, well, not especially, but we also wanted to mention for the East Bay folks that there is the Native Here East Bay chapter nursery. So that's good to look for that. Let me see. Then we had. So we talked a little bit about the changing names of the Mexican elderberry, which has got a new name. Can you recommend some shade-loving California natives?
Well, first of all, Pacific iris. I didn't have a picture of this, but hummingbird sage. Let's see. Coyote mint is happy. I've found it to be happy in partial shade. Depends on whether you're talking about deep shade or partial shade. Also, cream bush or ocean spray, holodiscus discolor, which is a shrub, but it's not particularly fast growing, enjoys shade. Coffee berry, which I have not been able to grow successfully, will grow in shade, partial shade. It depends on whether you're talking about wet shade or dry shade. That for shade, if it's a little bit damp where you are, there's the whole all the things that thrive in the redwood forest, sword ferns and wild ginger and inside out flower. Also the currants like partial shade. All of our native currant, many of our native currants like partial shade. If it's hot, they can take full sun at the coast.
Vivian's pointing out that there is a section in our online store for dry shade plants, so that would be helpful. Great, that's some great ideas there. And I
the
think
alum root or heuchera also, but I really recommend thinking about using Pacific iris. They actually, once the flowers fade, the leaves still look good.
Yes, I've had good luck with them too. There was a question about whether in the Going Native garden tour, whether hybrids such as some mimulus, or now they're called diplicus colors, are considered natives. We did have an answer that they are still, since they're hybrids of natives, are also considered natives. Is that your understanding?
That's the way we're treating it, because we're not going to insist that people only have species in their gardens. Consider, I know in Doug Tallamy's talk, he said the research really hasn't been done on how hybrids affect insect attractiveness. So at this point, we would rather people plant the hybrids than an exotic plant. And for example, the Pacific Coast hybrids are hybrids of all the, they're hybrids, but they're only hybrids of California species.
Right, right. So here's another question. When is the best time to try root cuttings of redbud? I don't know if you've ever tried that.
I'm not an expert propagator. I'm a lazy gardener. I would say, like I think if somebody knows better, they can chime in. But as I understand it, it's frequently easiest to take cuttings when things are in growth. And for redbuds, they start putting up growth in late winter, early spring.
Great.
But
we had someone mention that coyote mint is blooming in San Carlos from April until December. So that's pretty impressive. Mine dried up a couple months ago.
That's San Carlos is wetter than where I am. They have that moisture bay air.
Mm-hmm.
So it makes a difference.
So which of the plants that you showed are edibles?
Right. Well, ribes.
The currants.
Mm-hmm. The currants are edibles. Hollyleaf cherry is edible. It's a little bitter, but I've made syrup from the fruits. There isn't a lot of fruit on it, but I have cooked them to get a syrup. Elderberry is edible cooked. You're not supposed to eat it raw. I made jam from elderberries and syrup. Manzanita, there's some books on this, but manzanita berries were used by indigenous people in a number of ways. And one thing is like a manzanita cider.
Mm-hmm.
Allium unifolium, the meadow onion, the bulbs are usable. I think the foliage too. We have a number of native onions and they're edible. I don't have enough of them to cut them. And of course, if you're willing to do the work, acorns are edible.
Right, right. I don't know if you mentioned yerba buena, but that's a good shade plant and can be used in tea and so forth, I think, too.
That's right. And yeah, it needs a moisture environment. At least it hasn't grown in my yard, so I tend to forget about it. But it's a beautiful ground cover if it works well for you. I've seen it in a number of yards,
Mm-hmm.
and it's magnificent and so fragrant when you touch it. And good for tea.
Right.
Cleveland sage makes a great tea as well.
Yes. So question, after the wildflowers go to seed in your wildflower area, how do you maintain it? Does anything else grow there, or is it bare in late summer and fall?
I have my wildflower areas are mixed with grasses. So I have something going on, grasses and small shrubs.
Mm-hmm.
Because I don't really want to have a big bare area. So that's what I do is I mix them in. I keep some area open for them, keep the shrubs from taking it over, but there's something else going on. because yes, they're ephemeral. And of course, what I have going in my meadow are plants that are naturally part of grasslands. So they're mixed in with the grasses. They compete with the grasses. The blue-eyed grass, the western blue flax, and the tarweed or madia. I can just let them go to seed. I also have another plant which I did not take pictures of. I don't have a lot of good pictures of it, called gumweed, another horrible name for a very attractive plant, which is yellow, cheerful yellow daisy flowers most of the summer that also grows easily with the grasses. So
Spring dahlias are great in the garden. We have some more people chiming in on the whole blue-eyed grass on the hill controversy. So Georgia, who lives up in the hills, says, yes, it grows naturally in the south and west facing slopes, meaning blue-eyed grass. We have someone else saying it's on a slight slope, and there are people saying it would enjoy the drainage a slope would provide. I guess so. Okay, there's those of you who want to plant on a hill, I think it's suggested there. So someone else has mentioned that they've done very well with two plants that she doesn't see used very often, cow parsnip and soaproot. Have you tried either?
Okay, yes, I have soaproot. I really have to get some good pictures of it. I tried it in an area that was a lot of plants die. I notice when I'm on hikes that soaproot seems to grow at the edges of woods. And I have those canyon oaks on canyon oaks on my corner, and next to it, this is where I have the most slope.
Right.
So actually here in this area where I have some grasses, I planted like one soaproot, and it did really well. So I planted another one, and they're reseeding in the whole area. They get shade from these oaks. These two pictures are sort of connected, and so they're on the edge of the woods essentially.
Right.
And on a hillside, which is where I see them typically, although they grow on a flat too. So I mimicked what I saw on many trails, and they're really happy, and they're reseeding. And the soil in this area is really poor. It was very compacted. We've worked on it, but a lot of things don't do well here. Soaproot likes it, and I haven't tried cow parsnip. I think it needs more water than I typically have in my yard.
It seems to grow a lot along the coast. I haven't seen it much in gardens in the valley, but we'll see.
But I
Find out
really,
for that one.
soaproot is great. Soaproot is also like it dries up and disappears, so you need to have other things going with it, which is why I have it in the area with grasses. But if you find them, I don't know, it's really, really happy in the place I planted it. So
great. We had a request to discuss your watering regime, different zones for different water needs. I know that's a big question because you have a big yard, but.
Well, yeah, it was really frustrating when I first started gardening because we sort of did it with the existing watering system, which wasn't very controllable. And so we redid the yard and zoned things. And for example, where I have the blue oak and the Vermontodendron, I started those things out with water, and they get almost no water now. It's still not quite as the only place we still have sprinklers is with the meadow. We did have them updated to more water safe sprinklers, but for a meadow, what we have is Netafim, which is the underground stuff. It's pretty good, although it's been in there now in the back, it's been in since 2009, and we've had our first repairs. Some things broke. Yeah, so we have, I think, 3 controllers, a lot of zones, so we can control things a lot differently. And our vegetable garden is on its own, has its own zone, so of course it can get more water than anything else. So that's the thing. If you want to be able to control watering and have automated watering, you've got to have a lot of controllers. We have 4 controllers for the whole yard, and even that, you know.
It takes
So
some
I
thought.
don't,
It takes some work with a designer, I think, to lay it
yeah,
out.
we had, that's one of the things when we redid the backyard, said, okay, we really got to get this watering thing controllable so we can get things, we can put things in zones and give them, because it's a it's too big a yard to hand water. So we wanted to be able to water it.
It's great. Here's one I don't know if you can answer. So any advice if I'm also a cat owner? I don't know how I'd answer that.
I don't see that cats would, I don't know. I used to have cats and I gardened, and I don't know. The only thing I had to watch out for with cats, because I grew catnip, was to put a bushel basket over it in the spring because they would eat it down to the nubs until it got big enough. I don't know. Cats don't,
I'm an indoor cat owner myself, so I don't know.
I would recommend keeping cats indoors because I lost 2 of them because they were outdoor cats. But
Yeah.
and I wouldn't have cats outdoors now because I have a lot of birds in my yard and they'd kill the birds.
Yeah.
But cats are not hard on plants particularly.
Yeah.
Only catnip. Only catnip.
Yeah. They love that. When's the best time to deadhead? It maybe depend on the plant, I imagine.
It depends on the plant. It depends on the plant. I mean, most of the deadheading, I mean, we start deadheading in fall typically. And my meadow gets cut once a year. And I have someone who does help me, and she's given, you know, she's like, says, okay, it's now time to cut this grass. But I used to just cut it all in October, late October, or before the, you know, before the rains. And I don't own a mower anymore. I got big, really sharp hedge clippers and would just go out there and cut the grass. It took about an hour or so. I had to break it up in a couple sessions, but so I'm doing a lot of deadheading now because typically it seems like most of the plants that their seeds have dropped. So and you know, if I cut deadhead, I shake it out onto the ground, and I guess maybe in the fact that there might be insects, possibly I should leave it. And I do leave a lot of stuff on the ground as mulch, you know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think
Chop it up.
this is about a good time, maybe a little bit later, maybe around now to cut back the fuchsia and things like that.
Yeah, it's my fuchsia's still blooming and it hasn't started growing yet, but you really have to cut California fuchsia pretty much almost to the ground to refresh it. Otherwise, it gets ugly and leggy. And so probably in January, I will cut the fuchsia will be cut back. In January, actually, the benefit of COVID is I think I'm finally going to divide my irises, which have been needing to be divided for about 5 years. And we would always take these exciting trips in winter when it was time to divide them, and I was too busy getting up ready for the trips. So I'm stuck home, so I think I'm finally going to divide my irises.
Great.
January is a good time. January, February is a good time to divide iris. One of the rules of pruning is that you prune plants when they're dormant. So you don't prune manzanita in the winter. You should prune them in the summer, and the same goes for oaks.
That's great advice.
Yeah, and that's one of the things that I've learned. And if you want to keep your California plants healthy, you should not prune them in the winter if they grow in the winter.
Right. It's learning their rhythms,
You have to learn their rhythms.
Yeah. So
one of the things, holly leaf cherry, however, you can cut any time of year. It's totally amenable. You could turn it into topiary if you want.
Crows would enjoy that. So someone asked about live oaks and what to plant under oaks. Coyote mint and Ceanothus diamond height would work. I have a different Ceanothus under my oak. I'm not sure about the coyote mint. Mine's in full sun. Any others that would do? Carolyn chimed in that prunella does well under oaks. Prunella vulgare, which is self-heal.
Hummingbird sage.
Hummingbird
and of course,
sage. Salvia
Pacific iris.
Not too much, and nothing that takes a lot of water.
nothing that takes much water.
Okay.
And there's lists of these. That's sort of some of the ones that I know of that I have experience with that grow well
Right.
under oaks. And heucheras, especially heucheras or alum roots, will grow under oaks.
Mm-hmm.
The big one, island alum root, does well under oaks.
Right.
And the good thing too is it's a little bit, every now and then we get these cold snaps.
Mm-hmm.
And because it's from the Channel Islands, it doesn't like them. But if it's growing under an oak, it's protected from the coldest air.
Right. Vivian points out also that there's a section in our online store for dry shade plants, which is kind of what you need for an oak underplanting. Georgia mentions yerba buena, ocean spray, woodland strawberry, ribes sanguineum. Those are general shade plants. Ribes are great.
Snowberry. That's another
yeah.
one. Snowberry. Snowberry will grow, and ribes viburnifolium.
Right, and I have one of those too. Let's see. Okay, we had another question on red buckwheat deadheading in winter. Mine's still going, so I don't know. What do you think about the red buckwheat?
Well, at least in my experience, I actually tend to cut them severely in winter.
Mm-hmm.
They look better, and also they reseed for me. Mm-hmm. So once they start getting, I cut them back. If they don't make it, there'll be another plant coming on, and they look better if you cut them. So I cut them in winter. If they're brand new, when the seed pods would have turned black, I cut them because then they start looking bad. I kind of like the rusty color, but I don't. When they turn black, I cut them. That's midwinter.
Right. How do you control? This is a good one. How do you control unwanted weeds in your wildflower area? I think it's weed.
Well, I use some mulch, and that's another good thing with growing wildflowers. If you have them going in a place with grasses, that helps suppress weeds. I don't have a ton of weeds in my wildflower area because I have plants at the edge of the property that sort of do help prevent seeds from blowing in from the street,
Mm-hmm.
So the meadow was the place where we had the most problem with weeds, and started using some light mulch in areas where the grasses don't completely cover, where it's hotter. And so leaving completely bare ground means you're going to get weeds. So I would suggest light mulch, mm-hmm. light enough so that they can reseed, but it helps discourage weeds.
Right. Keep an eye on it. Being involved with your garden is important, and learning to recognize the weeds when they're little.
Too, because a lot of them, one of the strategic things to do is a lot of seeds blow in from other properties. So if you're growing things on a place where you're facing the street, where stuff is blowing around, put some small shrubs along the edge, and it helps. I have so many fewer weeds in my backyard than in my front yard.
That's key. Yeah. So we did have a question. Do you prefer mature plants or to plant by seeds mostly?
As I said, I'm a lazy gardener. I'm not real technical. So I tend to plant, well, not mature plants. I like planting small plants.
Small perennials.
Small perennials, small shrubs, whatever. I've occasionally had good luck with a few big things, like when we planted these oaks that are in this picture, they were in those big square tubs. We had this is when, after we remodeled, they brought them in, and I was nervous, but they all survived, because it's much easier to get a plant to survive if it's from a gallon or smaller, and ideally I like the 4-inch to 6-inch pots. And I know when I've thrown seeds out, I don't get a high return. I know you have to start them. You do better if you start them in trays and cover them with wires. I have a lot of birds, and when I throw seeds around, it's like I've just thrown out Um, I've just set out a feast for the birds, I think.
Yeah, they appreciate it. How are you doing? A few more questions, or we gotta keep coming. So just
I'm good. I'm good.
all right.
I'm good. I love talking about plants.
I know. I'm glad. A couple more things people were sharing about cow parsnips, and wants shade and lots of moisture, zone 9 with afternoon shade. And also I mentioned in Yosemite, cow parsnip is very significant without shade, but there's a lot of water. So it's a combo of water and or shade for it to thrive.
And that's why I've
Edge and
never
good rain
tried
years.
my garden. That's
Yeah.
why that is not a habitat that I have.
No, not in Saratoga. I don't know if it grows there at all. It was mentioned that on the main CNPS website, if people are talking about cats, there are some Southern California garden tours. One of them has some cat videos. So they have a cat tunnel. So there's lots of information on the state webpage from other garden tours around the state. So we had some talk about designers on our list on our chapter website. So someone said they have fuchsia growing next to the garage door, full of sun, but they're popping up. They're becoming a little weedy in the cracks of the cement. What is a better plant to put there? I'm not sure.
Full sun, full sun. I'd put a buckwheat there.
It's not. It's never weedy. It seems like.
Yeah, I'd put like rosy buckwheat there. It can take the full sun and the heat, and it won't. It's not as aggressive as California.
Great. Someone asked, can you tell us a little bit about columbine?
I wish I could. They all die in my yard. So
they do seem to like shade around here.
I've tried them in shade, and they supposedly like dry shade, but they don't like it in my yard. They dwindle and die.
One of your few failures, I think.
Well, another failure for me is coffeeberry. People say it's easy to grow. They all die.
They can be tricky. Speaking of failures, someone says they're a calocortis failure. Any advice?
Calocortis?
Yeah. Do you have any Mariposa lilies in your yard?
No, I don't really. I think in my yard I'd have to grow them in pots. I have heavy clay, and it's really mostly a flat lot. I have a few mounds, but this is just kind of showing you what can you grow on a typical valley, heavy clay, flat lot, mostly flat. No, and I don't have a lot. I don't fool around with a lot of things in pots that have to be moved in and out.
Right. I haven't seen them. I know some people have them in their yards, but
Steve, if we have a garden tour, Steve Rosenthal, I believe, has some calocortis in his yard. He has a garden in the east near Alum Rock, and he has some amazing stuff. And Steve is a really skilled propagator, and he's very detail oriented. He's a much less lazy gardener than I am, and you can see some amazing things in his yard. And he's been on the tour, so you might look for Steve Rosenthal's garden on our gngT.org website. Some of the photos of what he grows are amazing. He's also a fantastic photographer.
He really is, and does so much for restoration in Alum Rock Park and other places. You had your bush poppy, your dendromecon. Do you how much do you prune it? Well, when do you prune it? And how much? Your bush poppy.
I pruned it in fall and winter. I haven't gotten a whole lot of guidance on that. And it's actually not particularly happy right now. And I'm trying to figure out why. Because it's such a fantastic shrub.
It really is beautiful. So let's see. I'm not sure. We had another question about watering. For all your native plants, did you change their watering schedules? At what point? How? I'm not quite sure I understand that question.
Well, I watered more. We watered more when they were getting established. We've been cutting back. We cut back more. We cut back more during the drought. I have not cut back my watering yet in winter, like some winters, because we don't have any rain. in fact, I'm thinking about increasing it for the meadow because I planted some seeds and I'd like them to grow. I'm just praying for rain. But typically I cut way back in the winter, but we did cut back last winter and I lost plants, I think because they were not watered enough and then we had the horrible hot summer.
Mhm.
So we don't have watering restrictions yet, so I'm thinking I'm going to water my plants in the winter to hope and to maybe now it's cool, I can water them. Um, so yeah,
Yeah,
I
we'll
mean
see about this winter. So
I don't know. I don't know about this winter. I keep looking for rain in the forecast and not seeing it.
yeah, I think we all are at this point. Although enjoying the hiking, but a little bit too dry. I think that's about it. Does anybody have anything else? Yes, we just we got another comment about the Latin names. Yes, we acknowledge that some updates are needed from in those some of those names. We'll work on that.
Yeah, when I was updating this, I was focusing on the pictures. I didn't remember about the names needing updating until I gave the talks.
That's okay. They're
Sorry.
going to change again, so it's okay. So my one final question just came in. I think this should be the last one. Then, why are 6-inch pots better than the larger ones to start?
Um, well, I've actually seen studies. I mean, this has been done in general that, well, actually, Sunset did it, that small plants settle in faster. Um, and in a year, you can't really tell the difference and you have less mortality. Also, I have heavy clay and I prefer planting smaller plants because it's easier to dig smaller holes than larger holes. Um, And also, I think smaller plants have more structure to get supported, and there's a lag time as plants get their roots established. I think that's part of it. Um, and small plants are still at the point where I think they're growing more rapidly, more chance of large plants being root bound. So I love planting plants from small plants. In my yard now, I have to surround them with chicken wire because we didn't used to happen, but we now have a pretty hefty population of rabbits, and they will chew any small plant down. Once they're big enough, it's okay. I don't get deer, but we do have rabbits. And I planted a white sage, which I don't know if it has a very pungent aroma. I thought it would be safe. Well, some creature bit it they didn't like the taste. They bit it off and left it lying. And so I said, okay, if they're going to eat sage, they'll eat anything. So I now have chicken wire enclosures to keep my small plants from being eaten as they grow bigger.
We
Once they
did have
get to about,
we
18
did have
inches
one
or so.
question about pocket gophers, which we didn't address, but underground gopher cages too, which is a whole nother
Well,
talk, I think.
I haven't had too much trouble, but I did have several. I've tried to plant the island mallow, the one with the beautiful purple flower that was shown, and we've lost them. And I did my research and seen that they're beloved. They're a real gopher magnet. We certainly have gophers. That's one of the things. Many native plants native plants have evolved with gophers, and I think they often go for exotics over other things, but they like the island mallow. And my vegetable garden has gopher wire under it. It's in raised beds with gopher wire. Otherwise, you can't. Gophers love vegetables, but by and large, I don't have a lot of issue with gophers except getting annoyed with them for making a mess. They haven't. The only plants that I know they've killed are my new, trying to get established island mallows.
Interesting.
Everything
Okay.
else,
I think we're good. We're getting a lot of thank yous and a lot of appreciation for your time and your knowledge and expertise in your gorgeous yard. So thank you very much. And Vivian, do you have anything else that you wanted to chime in?
I think other than thank you to Madeline, she's always got a lot of great information to share and love seeing pictures of her garden. So thank you, Madeline. Thank you, Judy. Okay, I'm going to go, unless Madeline or Judy, you have anything else to say, I'm going to go ahead and end the session. So thank you all for joining us, and tune in and subscribe to our YouTube channel too. You can always get notified when we get new listings up there. So thanks, everybody.